I'm here to talk about community solutions, but I might just take a moment to make two macro observations. I think there's something kind of chilling about Europe preparing a Circular Economy Act while Europe enables the genocide against the Gazan people and lays waste to their infrastructure. And then the second point, I think, is one for us to look at seriously. It will be very hard in the future to consider ourselves a credible circular economy if we are a tax haven, because that takes the resources and money out of countries that need it to help them fight the climate crisis, to help them build their own circular systems. So I think the greatest thing we could do in all of this area in Ireland, because we are small, is pursue global tax justice. And that's a key point as well. But onto my own presentation now. We're not going to do that at Bose. So for those of you who don't know, Bohemian Football Club is a fan-owned football club. That makes us a little bit different. If we're owned by our fans, we respond to our fans' needs, not the needs of investors. And we get a little bit big-headed with that, and we think, well, if we can own a football club, maybe we can own anything else. And that's at the root of our work on climate, is that we want to create climate action that builds equality. I took this photo. Some of you may have seen this presentation before. Apologies, we're quite busy. You don't get time to refresh your presentations. I took this photo in 2015 in the first week of the Paris negotiations, of what became the Paris Agreement. That's Mary Robinson on the left. I worked with her foundation, Al Gore on the right. We brought together some of the poorest, most climate vulnerable countries in the world with some of the wealthiest and most powerful. And that group became what was called the High Ambition Coalition and ultimately drove the Paris Agreement over the line. I don't think at that time we could have believed we would be so far behind where we set out to be. And I also don't think at that time we could have imagined the politics of the world that we live in today. But what was interesting about that room was there was concepts being discussed like just transition and climate justice and gender equality and human rights informed climate action that took quite a long time to percolate through to our communities, right? At that time, my community at home, my friends didn't give a damn what I was doing. They didn't know what I was doing, didn't understand it. I'm not sure they even still do today, but I'll keep talking to them about it. So when we wrapped up the foundation, I decided maybe the thing to do would be to look locally at the most intractable issues here in Ireland. And I rented a camper van and drove around Ireland, pulling into farmyards for breakfast, lunch and dinner, ate really well and had really good conversations with farmers about climate policy and what that might mean for them. And what became very obvious very quickly was that farmers had no issue with climate policy. They had issues with bad climate policy that left them behind or that wrecked their livelihoods. Climate policies that didn't give them a sense of belonging to the future. And I think that's what I really want to tap into today about like how we think about circularity, how we think about the future. We have to think about belonging as being a fundamental constituent of that. That piece of work became what's called the People's Transition, published with Task in 2020, and I guess this is its own kind of circle. Sometimes you write a report that could be written on the back of a napkin, but you have to write a report so you can present it in a fancy room. But basically the idea is if you allow people to participate and you value what they have to say, you really value what they have to say, not like tokenistically value it, and then co-create solutions with them, solutions that they can co-own, then you're on to something. Then I think you can create a virtuous cycle of action that might just give us the ability to change in the time that we have left. And that's the piece of circularity I'm very curious about is, do we have circular economies or do we have extractive economies ultimately when it comes to money? This is what I think a circular economy looks like in practice. I think this might be one type of creation of the Kate Raworth's donut economics made real. This is called a community wealth building model. This is where anchor institutions like hospitals or universities or other things that just aren't going to leave your community use their procurement, which was mentioned quite a bit earlier on, to create sheltered markets so that communities can respond to that demand and create cooperatives that not just shorten supply chains and create more sustainable produce, but also give people a stake in their local economy, which they have lost and which is driving the chronic inequality that we see today. AIB got interested in the work that we did on the People's Transition. They gave us a little bit of money to trial it in 2021. And this is what the trial looked like. We mapped our community. We did it in Phibsborough because we were all in lockdown, and I lived in Phibsborough, so it made sense to do it there. But we mapped our community first and foremost. That's important. If you go into a community and you say to them, hey, we want to talk to you about circular economy or climate change or whatever, you'll meet the same 7 people who've been worried about this since 1992. And everyone else will be turned off. Whereas if you map your community, we found out there was one street that had nearly 80% single mothers. Now, if you don't go to them or put on childcare or something, you'll never hear from them. They'll never inform the policies that you're trying to create. That allowed us to do some deep listening, and then it kind of offered some solutions. We don't think communities should be forced to come up with their own solutions. We should bring expertise in to help with the solutions once we know what their problems are. And if you can find solutions that map to their problems but also are good for the planet, then you're onto the winner. We proposed cooperative approaches to food delivery and cooperative approaches to retrofitting. And that led to what's coming next. But this is just an observation. I think we're a bit like Sisyphus in terms of climate action approaches, and sometimes maybe, I don't know the circular economy piece as well, but I'd say similarly with circular economy piece. Climate action is like this boulder we're pushing up a hill, and we are oblivious to the fact that the hill is made of poverty and inequality and the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis, the social dimensions. It gets harder and harder to push that boulder up the hill because we're not trying to do anything to make that hill any flatter. So we can't solely focus on the boulder in our view and ignore the hill. You've probably seen this graph before. Just to hammer home that point, the richest 10% of people in the world are responsible for about 50% of lifestyle consumption emissions, and the bottom 50% are responsible for about 10% of lifestyle consumption emissions. You might think, well, that makes sense because it's a global analysis, but actually it holds in Ireland. The richest 500,000 people in Ireland are responsible for 50% of lifestyle consumption emissions in Ireland. So people's circumstances determine whether they can act on the climate crisis at all or not. We need to stop telling people they have to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps by taking shorter showers and it's going to save the planet. Like, it's not. And it's a fallacy that people don't believe. We've learned this through engaging with our community. That's us. That's Bohemian Football Club. We sit in the middle of, we've been on that site since 1901. We've existed since 1890 and we've been fan-owned all that time. But you can see we sit in the middle of a community. And we're owned by the community, so it's possible for us to go out and ask the community their opinion on key points related to this work. And that's what we've done. We did a project with some pretty big European football clubs, including Club Bruges, Werder Bremen, St. Pauli, and others, looking at football for climate justice, building climate just solutions within football. And the first thing we did was go out and conduct a survey within 2 kilometers of our respective stadia to understand the challenges that the people in those communities faced. One thing that jumped off the page for us is we asked the question, do you sometimes struggle with your electricity bills? And 43% of the people living within a 2-kilometer radius of Dalymount came back and said yes. Like, that was startling to us, right? If we're going to build a transition and people are already struggling to pay their heating bills, people are not putting on their heating because they have to feed their kids. That's unacceptable, and we'll never make a transition unless we address this first. Similarly, I did a piece of work with the UNFCCC. Actually, I've just started this again. We're doing a piece of work for them in advance of COP in Brazil this year. But the question, this was a survey that went out through global sports organizations, so the International Olympic Committee, FIFA, UEFA, the NFL, the NBA. We asked a basic question: what climate solutions can you access? And from left to right there, that's retrofitting, energy-efficient appliances, heat pumps, solar power, organic food, electric mobility. We're not dealing with an awareness problem. People aren't moving on this because they're not aware of the solutions. They're not moving on this because they simply can't afford the solutions. This is why the transition is failing. It's an affordability crisis. So when we think about sport, I'd prefer we didn't think about football fans like this, right? As an individual who, if we can just get him to buy a bamboo toothbrush now and take a shorter shower, it'll all be well. Really, this is football, right? And this is the opportunity. That's 5 million people on the streets of Buenos Aires celebrating Argentina's World Cup victory. Football brings that sense of belonging that we're talking about. It's a cultural entity that gives people a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, at a time when actually our economy has alienated people and forced people into their homes and made people feel more isolated than they've ever felt. We need to use these opportunities to connect people, but we need to use them sincerely with people's best interests at heart. Otherwise, it becomes another con, and people see through those cons very quickly. So we want to use the economies of scale that are inherent in football fandom to build community wealth through the climate action we take, through the circular economy action we take. Who owns the assets that will drive these changes? Are they going to be owned in the same way as the current economy? If so, they're going to just drive inequality and build resentment, and ultimately we'll all be governed by people like Nigel Farage and Donald Trump. So our work, I'll fly through this really quickly. Our work's been going on for a while, but it really kind of caught fire on this day, which is about almost exactly 2 years ago. That was the first day for both my colleagues there, Leo and Caitlin, and we just managed to take over what was the old gym in Phibsborough. I don't know if you know Phibsborough Tower, but we took over the old gym unit. It was pretty manky. We were able to organize mehels and convert the space. So first of all, we built our office, which was great, and that's all of that is circular. We begged everything except the computers. And then we started on the second unit. We had no money to do any of this, so we did it all ourselves, except the electricity. We paid an electrician. And we were able to completely rebuild this space. And this space has now become home to what's called the Spark project, but it's now evolving into the Bohemian Climate Cooperatives. We've taught 160 people in an 8-week program that we give for free to the community. That includes it's bike mechanics, energy efficiency, off-grid solar. We're adding 3D printing for repair and wind power and green building to it, actually. But the idea isn't really to teach them the skills, it's to teach them how to work as a community, to talk to each other, to make friends within the community, and to sort of build that social fabric that we really need at this time. We've actually, we've 160 people on the waiting list to do that program. We just need to find the time to fit it all in. We've also been able to do some great things. Oxfam brought 50 climate activists from around Europe to our space for a day of planning and strategizing. We run a community-supported agriculture project. 50 families get their veg from us. Well, we don't grow it. Beach Park Eco Farm grow it, but they pick it up in Dalymount. We've run thrift shops, recycling, I guess, in a way. And that was a pretty special day that we had in May of this year, where Bernie Sanders and Mary Robinson both came and visited the project and talked about this idea of community wealth building writ large. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to move really quickly. This was the Spark. You can see we found a home in 2023. We started our skills program in 24. We've a bike library now and a library of things. We have a kids climate cooperative, but basically an after-skills program. But the exciting piece is what comes next, the launch of an actual cooperative. Our vision has changed since this project started. We wanted to launch a cooperative. Now we want to build a cooperative ecosystem. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Our North Star for the cooperative ecosystem is in Mondragon. Don't know if anyone's heard of Mondragon in Basque Country. That's Mondragon in Basque Country. It's just a valley with a relatively small town in the middle of it. In 1956, the first cooperative in Mondragon was established by Jose Maria Arizmendieta, and he said this: "The workers will not believe in the Church's social doctrine if they cannot see it put into practice through work for society. Work, capital, and organization are not ends in themselves, but means for better serving human interests." We're not trying to push the Church's social doctrine, as you might have guessed, but I think the same is true for climate action. People won't believe in climate action until they see it make a positive difference in their lives. They won't just do it because the world's coming to an end, because for many people, they're more worried about the end of the week. Mondragon is incredible now. Mondragon's 92 cooperatives. It employs about 70,000 people. Worker-owned cooperatives, 70,000 people employed, 11 billion in revenue, 500 million in profits last year. That's community-owned and community-led. We actually brought a delegation of 20 people over there, including some people from Dublin City Council and Dublin Development Projects. We have a report on that visit. If anyone wants it, get in touch, I'll send it to you. Our bridge to get there is in Cleveland, in Ohio. where after the recession they went and visited Mondragon, tried to find out what could be done, copied the Mondragon model, brought it back to Cleveland. They've now 6 cooperatives, 500 people owned, employed, and it is helping to break intergenerational poverty in some of the poorest neighbourhoods in Cleveland. It's incredible. Again, there's a report on that. If we combine climate with community wealth building, it's a new frontier both for climate and for community wealth building. It is climate justice by economic design. It's how we design our economies. 9 seconds. This is the pipeline for what we're building. We've got some wonderful insurance people who are helping us build a not-for-profit insurance mutual that will fund the system. We're looking at a closed-loop food cooperative system, particularly targeting school meals. We have a solar cooperative concept in the pipeline as well, and then longer down the road, probably 3 or 4 years away, there's some plans afoot around a laundry, which is similar to what happens in Cleveland. Can't do this alone, obviously. This is not a Bose thing, this is a Dublin thing. We just want to initiate it because we have the culture of fan ownership, of community ownership. We have already got a remarkably diverse bunch of partners that we're working with, and very keen to work with anyone else who really wants to come in and put the shoulder to the wheel on this. So that's it. Sorry, I'm a little bit over time. Thank you.